there we go.
Hi, everyone. It's Marianne Meskis, Executive Director at the Dravet Syndrome Foundation. As our community knows, there's nothing more powerful than the patient voice. And for that reason, we're so excited to have Julia joining our Dravet community today for this educational webinar. And we're going to talk about effective storytelling techniques. And so I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been an incredible journey working with Marianne and with the Dravet community. And I'm really excited to be here today talking about one of my favorite things, storytelling. So we're going to go for about half an hour. If we go a little bit over, I think that's okay. If anyone has questions, the chat can move kind of fast. So I encourage you to put them in the Q&A box. If you could do that, and then we can kind of keep them all sorted. If you can't find the Q&A, put them in the chat. It's totally fine. We'll figure it out. So if you don't know who I am, anything about me, my name is Julia Campbell. I'm a mom of two. I have a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old. I've been a business owner for 12 years. I'm a former development and marketing director for very small nonprofits. I've written 2 books for nonprofits, one on storytelling and one on building and mobilizing a social media community for your nonprofit. I host a podcast, and I'm a passionate digital storytelling evangelist. So I believe, just as Marianne said, in the power of the patient voice, but I believe in the power of storytelling to change the world, to shift the narrative, to really create transformative change. So the objective of our webinar today is we want to empower you to be more confident in developing and sharing your personal stories. And that's really the key, is the development, the sharing, and the confidence. So there's really no right or wrong way to do this. There's only feeling confident, feeling empowered. Storytelling is the perfect way to raise awareness and engage supporters. And I'm just going to share a couple of slides on the power of storytelling. So neurologically, storytelling actually affects the brain, and we are hardwired to listen for stories, to share stories, and it helps the way that we process information. So often nonprofits and organizations, they do share data points, which are effective for the logistical side of our brain or the logical side of our brain, that helps us understand the problem and something that is meant to be solved and needs to be solved. But in order to create empathy, in order to really create that sort of shared connection amongst us as human beings, storytelling is that effective communication method. It's something that has been done since the time that we could first communicate. So a lot of books have been written about this. So many studies have been done on the power of storytelling. We know it, but not only do we know it intrinsically, there really is scientific data to back up the power of storytelling. And to me, the power of storytelling not only grabs attention, but it helps us process the information that we're hearing, and it helps us empathize with the person telling the story, with the person experiencing the story. So the stories we tell create the world we live in. Great storytelling does so much more than just communicate a message. It's really gets at the heart of how humans process information. And stories help us visualize how we can improve our own lives and the world around us. And stories define our culture, our values, and what we deem important. Stories create empathy, especially around issues that are hard to wrap our brains around. I was 13 when I fled war in Tigray. This is what conflict has done to my home. We've seen this, especially around the war in Ukraine. We've seen this around issues that are a lot more complicated and really hard to understand, hard to contextualize. Stories help us say, oh, this person is just like us experiencing a hardship. This person, this child, this woman, this man, they are experiencing something that we can understand. And the story helps really make it much more relatable, So if you're just sharing statistics about how many people are suffering, how many people are, I'm just thinking of Ukraine, how many people are refugees, it's very hard to process that. And it's also very hard to understand how you can take that action and how you can really make it relatable to you. But the story is what brings us all together. It really is the thread that connects us as humans. Stories also really help shed light on complicated problems. If you are looking at a lot of the coverage of recent news stories, then you can see how storytelling is being used to humanize people on both sides of the issue, on both sides of the equation, because it's so important to really understand what people are going through. And this is the way, this is what's being shared on social media. We're not going to share data, statistics, reports on logistical issues. We're not going to share necessarily news reports. We are going to share a human interest story that has touched our heart. Stories also fill knowledge gaps. This is so important. Stories help us address myths and misconceptions. Stories help us address stereotypes, and mission-driven storytelling has the potential to change hearts and minds around complex and difficult issues. It can really work wonders to increase empathy and shift perspectives. Stories empower volunteers. Stories give people a voice. This is incredibly important. These are some of my favorite stories. If you look at the Dravet stories on the Dravet Foundation website, I love that it starts off, these Dravet syndrome families have a lot to share. Read about their journeys and advice. So that is really the purpose of storytelling, to share with us a little piece of your journey, and then to share advice and understanding for other people going through similar experiences. So I absolutely love the stories. If you have not seen the stories on the Dravet syndrome website, I really encourage you to check it out. It helps contextualize. It really helps us understand the overarching effects of the syndrome across all of the different aspects: school, work, family, siblings, all of that. And most importantly, mostly for us today, stories inspire generosity, not even generosity in just giving, but generosity in attention, generosity in participating, generosity in volunteerism. Stories really inspire people to take action. They feel like they can participate and that they can be a part of writing a happy ending to the story. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. He has a TEDx talk and a book and a workbook called Start With Why. And what I find so appealing about his work is that he talks about how too often we focus on the what. We focus on what we do. We focus on the programs, the services. We focus on the data. We focus on the how. But we don't often focus on the why, the greater purpose, our vision for a better future. And stories help us go back to the why. Stories help us talk about the vision that we're trying to create for future generations. Stories help us talk about the world that we want to see in the future. So focusing on the why, because what's so important for us to understand, especially because we're so close to the issue at hand, we're so close to this information. We don't know what people don't know. We have that curse of knowledge. So we need to focus on the why much more than the how and the what. And that's a fabulous TEDx talk. So I actually have a video here. I kind of want to play it, but I don't think that I set up my screen sharing to play music. But the point of this video, I'll just play it. And if we can't hear it, we will, let me see. It can be played without the audio as well. So in this video, this particular organization, they were trying to raise awareness about what it was like to raise a child with Down syndrome. And they went to a different an ad agency, and they said, we'd love for you to just create a bunch of stories, film a bunch of stories, and talk truly to people about what it's like to bring up a child with Down syndrome, and the good, the bad, the ugly, the hard, the difficult, the wonderful, the fun. And what I think is so fantastic about this video is it appeals to people that understand the issue, people that are familiar with it, people that know about it, but it also appeals to complete strangers who may never have heard of this organization, and also are fairly, I don't want to use the word ignorant, but fairly unaware of actually what it's like to raise a child with Down syndrome. So how can you use these questions that you get from friends, family, from your networks? How can you use all of the different sort of maybe myths and misconceptions that you're addressing, maybe some different stereotypes? What do people ask you? What do people want to know? What are people genuinely seeking out for information? And as you can see in this video, stories they don't have to be a grand narrative of a person's name and what happened, and here's the hero's journey, and here's, Luke Skywalker throughout Star Wars. It doesn't have to be that way. It can really be a little vignette of one mother. Oh, this is so beautiful. One mother, one child, one mother, one father, one caregiver. It really can be that little vignette, anecdote moment that can truly tell the story. And then we can compile them all together. But that's absolutely one of my favorite videos of all time. And it was really just to raise awareness. They used it for a fundraising video. They then used it, they shared it with donors, and they encouraged them to give, but it was mostly for the World Down Syndrome Awareness Day, and they call it Dear Future Mom. It's just one of my favorites. So the key here is building community with our stories. We're not just sending out promotions. We're not simply just asking people to do something. We're trying to build a community around this issue, and we're trying to spread stories to a passionate audience. So the building blocks of a captivating story, there are several building blocks. Number one is the hook. So what's gonna grab my attention? This does not mean clickbait. This does not mean doing anything unethical. This does not mean spam. It means what's going to grab my attention. Sarah's life turned around in one night. That's really going to grab my attention. There's so much that's not normal about raising a kid with a disability. Goodwill's Life Works is something with a focus and routine he can do every day. And this photo, the visual element, is definitely something that can help us grab attention. So it doesn't have to be the caption. It could be the visual that's going to help us grab attention. Meet Brant. We met 11-year-old Brant at a distribution in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's experienced a hard couple of years with both parents out of the picture. So grabbing that attention, it's really not just about saying, here I am, I'm Julia, I'm here, I'm experiencing this. It's what are the details? What are the descriptive details? What are the things that are going to really help me visualize how the story is going? The second piece is the compelling character. So this is the person or people that are the focus of the story. So this is Poppy. This is what Boston Children's Hospital does on their Facebook page. They always are sharing these fantastic impact stories. I love that they have this caption to grab attention. Poppy looks just like your average 3-year-old who loves Curious George, swim class, playing dress up, and being a big sister. But when she was only 4 months old, she was diagnosed with retinoblastoma. So immediately it's like, okay, this is a child that you think you know, and then immediately this happens. And that's a great way to get me to continue reading on to see what happens. Often it can be told in the words of the person. It made me feel so good to move in. This is Christine. These are from the Pine Street Inn in Boston. If you can see it, you can be it. So using quotes, using anecdotes, using metaphors, using the actual words of the person that you're interviewing, that you're talking about, your actual words can really make an impact. This is from another organization I love called Amira. This is what hope looks like. So even putting that title on the story, telling me immediately what the story is about. This is a story of hope. This is how I'm going to feel. You know, Iris shared these words and wanted the community of Amira to hear them as well. This is what hope looks like. So how can we create that vision of hope? If you can't, or you are not comfortable sharing stories like that, there are always different ways. You can create photo montages. There are so many different video editing options that are very low cost, very low touch. I call them video editing for dummies. There's animated options. If you want to create an avatar, you don't always have to be the focal point of your story. It, of course, will help you in terms of your own network if you are sharing your story, but there are certain ways to go about it where you can tell stories from the third person perspective, and certainly be just as effective. So this is a video called Hungry Kate, the girl with a bellyache, and we're not going to play it, but if you want to watch it on your own when you get the slides. What I love about this video is it talks about the problem at hand and why we need to address it. It talks about hunger and why hunger is a problem. And then it talks about Kate, and it talks about what we can do next. And I think having that compelling character helps us as people who are not immediately immersed in the problem. It helps us understand that this is something that needs to be addressed. And that urgency, that relevancy, that's going to help you get the point across. We know that personal stories are the most powerful, and we can't get away from that. That doesn't mean sharing all of your details. And what I will say to all of you here is the rule of thumb that I use with my clients is that you don't want to share from your wounds. You want to share from your scars. So if there is an open wound, you don't want to share from that angle because it's going to be too painful for you. It's not going to be helpful for you. It's actually probably going to be detrimental to you. You want to share from your scars. And what that means is wounds that you had that maybe have healed a little bit or are healing. So I would never recommend, for instance, for my clients, someone that is in active crisis sharing their story. It's someone that has moved on slightly that still has a fantastic story to offer. Another key pillar of our key building block of a great story, descriptive details. This is what's going to bring that story to life. If I just say, hi, I'm Julia. This happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, and now I'm fine. That's not a compelling story. Descriptive details, sort of begging for change, the chill cut to the bone, the sea of humanity swept around me. I was part of the familiar landscape of this renowned city. All of those descriptive details, bring out your inner writer, like your inner Margaret Atwood, your inner Charles Dickens. Have some descriptive details, even if you just remember from that Boston Children's post where they said she loves Curious George and she loves stickers. Those are descriptive details. They're going to help the story become more memorable, and they're going to also help people relate to it more. Tell the story from your perspective. You can create a quote around your story. This is completely fine. Think about the visual that's going along with it, and then think about the call to action. So with this post, there's a visual. It's very evocative. Then there is a quote talking about what happened. And then there is a call to action, to support families like Deborah's. Visit the link in our profile. You might not be doing fundraising. You might be saying, to learn more about how you can support our work, to learn more about our efforts, to read more stories, visit the link in our profile, go to this particular website. The other important building block of a compelling story, stakes. Now, these are my kids. This is a very old picture, but I love this picture. They look a lot older now at 12 and 7, but they love the Berenstain Bear books. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Berenstain Bears, but the old Berenstain Bear books from the 70s and 80s, they would always have stakes. So Brother Bear, lied about failing his quiz and then crumpled up his paper and threw it in the swamp. The messy room. They promised they clean their room and they didn't clean it. There's just always a conflict. There's always stakes. The new Berenstain Bear books are very boring. Okay, Stan and Jan Berenstain died and then their kids took over. And the books are all just about the bears went to the aquarium. The bears went to the festival. The bears went to the amusement park. And it's just a recounting of things that happened. It's just saying they went to the aquarium, they had fun, they left. There are no stakes involved. There's no conflict. There's no actual interest. So my kids are not interested in the new ones at all, because a story without stakes is just an essay. We have to convey what's at stake. What are we fighting for? What are we advocating for? The Greater Boston Food Bank does this really effectively. Joe was unexpectedly unemployed. He was unable to feed his family. And this is what happened to Joe. You want to find out what happened to Joe. What's it like to be a childhood cancer survivor? It's complicated. The Baldrick Foundation, they're constantly answering questions. They're showing the stakes involved in the problem that they're solving, in the research that they're doing. And then, of course, the call to action. You need a call to action. So it doesn't have to always be donate, but it could be learn more. It could be join me. It could be DM me if you want to get involved, if you want to volunteer. When you're grabbing someone's attention and you are inspiring them, hopefully provoking them with your story, they want to know what to do next. Data makes people think, but emotions make them act. Really think through what you want people to do. What do they need to believe and feel in order to do it? And how can your storytelling not make them, but entice them, encourage them to believe and feel that way? There does need to be sort of an end game. So your messages in your stories, the smallest gesture or donation can mean the world. A little goes a long way. And what I want to say to everyone on this webinar is that the people around us, they don't necessarily understand the importance of donating. They don't know that $5 and $10, $20 can go a long way. They don't understand the importance of nonprofit organizations, and it's just not a part of their existence. It's always so funny to me when I meet people that don't give to charity. And I think, I just don't get it. But I also, that's a lot of people in this world. So it's up to us to create these messages to say, hey, there's something going on here that you need to pay attention to. There are important things in the world, and the smallest gesture can go a long way. So some examples, even just a little quote and a little photo, a great photo, sharing an article. There's so many times that we want to share articles. We want to share resources. Maybe we were in the news, we were interviewed, contextualizing it for our social media network. We both love to watch sports, travel to visit friends and family, and attend self-advocacy conferences, Angel and Aaron. This is a story. It doesn't have to be that beginning, middle, and end. It really can just be a great visual and a little bit of an insight, like lifting the veil into what their life is like. Today is Oliver Cameron's first birthday. Help us send birthday wishes all the way to England. Happy birthday, cutie. Boston Children's does this all the time. They're trying to build community. They're trying to get people involved and interested. They have a very passionate following, people that don't know Oliver, but people that are passionate about the work, that are passionate about children, that are passionate about helping provide a healthy life and surgery and healthcare to children across the world. And then, of course, if storytelling with photos and videos is not comfortable for you, there are always options. You don't have to be the face of this. You don't have to share identifying details. You don't have to be on camera all the time or even at all. You can share these graphics, anything that's sort of a photo that describes what you're saying. You can share a third-party story about what you're experiencing, a memory, an anecdote. It doesn't have to be all the time about you, about you, about you. It can really be about the community, about Dravet syndrome. It can be about other things in your life that you're experiencing that tie it together. It could be just something that happened to you on the way, dropping your child off from school. It does not have to be this big, all-encompassing story with every step of the way. The way I see it is storytelling, especially on digital channels, should really be like leading people along the path, like breadcrumbs, almost like in Hansel and Gretel, leading people along the path to where you want them to go. You're never going to share a story that's going to encompass every emotion, every step of the way, every doctor's appointment, everything that you have had to endure, everything that you've enjoyed. All of your experiences and memories are never going to be summed up in one story. So sharing just little pieces along the way, like little breadcrumbs, can be incredibly effective. Also, thinking about some of the events that Dravet syndrome participates in the foundation, like Giving Tuesday, there are tons of events that you can tie your story into, highlight other people's stories, and just look at this like great little photo. Just sharing a photo sometimes does wonders, works wonders. And what I want to impart to you is that the only way to get other people to share their stories is to really take this first step. So if you look at Macmillan Cancer Support, they were doing a storytelling campaign to get people to talk about their dads for Father's Day and get people to donate. And what they found was that they just were posting and no one was sharing. So they said, you know what? We have to have a team member. We have to have a staff member do it. Somebody has to take that first step. And then there was just a slew of comments, so many people posting, so many people sharing. Often people just need that sort of inspiration. They need someone to take that first step. They need someone to set the tone and set an example for the storytelling to come. This is another great example of just sort of a mission moment, a quote, two people, a great photo. This is an example of someone that was doing fundraising, highlighting people that fundraise for you, or highlighting people in your community, local businesses that are supporting you. I think are really fantastic resources. Sharing other people's content and other people's stories and highlighting other people's experiences, that can work really well. And just, really creating that community around storytelling, creating that community around this is a shared experience, a lived experience. And this is something that we want you to pay attention to. Giving people the tools they need. So this is where I do recommend that, you can, if it's something that you're inspired to do in your community or for your particular chapter or in your state or with your group of friends, you can create this campaign to ask people for their stories, to share their stories. But the key here is if you're going to be an ambassador asking people to share their stories, you have to have specific examples, specific instructions, let them know where they can upload it, how they can do it, what kinds of things you want to see. This could be really effective for national campaigns. And then the call to action, it really can be something like join me, join the movement, help children like this. We can do this together. Let's work to stop this. Let's solve this together. All of that kind of language is so powerful at the end of a story. Change starts here. Can we count you in? Think about your language that you're using within your storytelling and the language that you're using to really entice people and motivate and catalyze people to action. join me, join the movement. This is possible. We need to do this together, and let's solve this once and for all. And the last thing that I want to say, and I do want to take some questions. I love this quote from Maya Angelou. It's so, so important. It's just so relevant. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So just remember that at the end of the day. All right. Sandra just wrote, love it, in questions in the Q&A. If you do have questions as you are going through the material, let me see, I'm going to put my email in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions. All of you, by the way, are the experts. You're the experts on your lived experience. You're the experts on what it's like to live with a family member and a survivor of Dravet syndrome. So any way that you want to express it and tell your story is right and correct. And I just want to validate that. But I do think, having that purpose, having that why at the end of the day, why are we doing this? What are we hoping to accomplish? And sometimes this might just be getting something off your chest. It might just be wanting to tell everyone what you're experiencing. It might just be creating empathy. But with the call to action, if there is a call to action, then that's where the strategy comes in. And that's really where those intentional questions come in. And the next webinar is going to be all about how to use social media to build momentum and really encourage action around your stories. So I don't know, Marian, if you have anything else to add.
I just wanted to thank you. I mean, I think this is great, especially as we're rolling into June, which is Dravet Syndrome Awareness Month.
Yes.
The more we can raise awareness, it just assures that we have patients that are getting an earlier diagnosis, and that researchers and pharmaceutical companies and biotech really understand the many unmet needs in our community. So everyone who joined or watches this later, I would really encourage you to review Julia's notes and come up with a way that you can share your story in the future.
So Barbara did ask, this is a very, very good question. Sometimes I struggle to balance the negative with an uplifting message, especially when the topic is so hard, like Dravet. How's the best way to format that so you tell your story based on the reality of how hard Dravet is, but want to add positivity? That's a great question. I talked with Madison Gonzalez. She's the executive director of a children's hospice, and I interviewed her on my podcast. And we talked about storytelling around really tough topics. And what she recommends is just being honest, and you have your hard days and you have your good days. So you're not going to be sugarcoating things when days are hard, and then highlighting those positive moments as well. So when you saw that video about what is it like to have a child with Down syndrome, they're not going to be like, everything's great and wonderful. They'll say there's difficult times, really difficult times, but there's really positive times too. You don't have to do all of those in one story. At least I don't think so. I think you can say, you know what, today really sucked, and here's why. And then you can say, oh, today we went to the park and it was really great. So one story doesn't have to encompass all of those things. Marian, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think that's a really good point. And one of the things we often celebrate in our community is the term "Not Today Dravet." And so we talk about those good days, but I think it's really important to also focus on those rough days, because nobody really understands what we're going through except those that walk in our shoes. So I don't think we always have to be happy and positive when we're on social media. It's okay to say it's hard, and this is why we need help.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about unmet needs. I think it's very important to say we're doing great work, but there are still so many unmet needs in this community. That's really important. And people need to know that this is a problem. They need to know that it's something that is relevant and urgent. But Barbara, it's really up to you and your comfort level sharing those hard stories. But I completely understand what you're saying. You don't want to feel like you're being exploitative, but you really, I think just being completely honest and authentic is the important thing. I mean, we were just talking about my son's experience on Monday with his eye surgery, and I wrote about a little bit about it in my email newsletter today. And, I'm not dealing, my kids are relatively healthy, and I'm not dealing with something all the time. But when things are hard, I'm really not afraid to say it. I'm sort of like, this is what we're going through. And if I can help anybody in the same situation, and I think you'll find that you will be helping other people, even if they are not suffering from Dravet, they might have another issue that they're dealing with. But that's a really great question. Tina says, I'm pretty good at sharing our story and I love doing it anyway, or anywhere I can. Should I be sharing my stories to the DSF page? Do you want to answer that, Marianne? Yes.
Yes, definitely. I think, and not just there, but I think us having quotes and pictures from families just helps us when we're working on our social media posts or our email campaigns. I think, just like you said in the presentation, that's what people connect with when they see that, not the fact that we might have, awarded X number of grants last year. They want to know how the impact was for the patient and the family.
Absolutely. So share your stories where you're comfortable. Absolutely share them to the DSF page, share them to your own page. And the most powerful tool I think that we have is the patient voice. And that's what you said, Marianne. And I can't echo that more. For consultants, for people working in the foundation, it's so important to have people that are, quote unquote, on the front lines talking about this issue. And people listen to their peers. And that's really how empathy gets started. That's really how cultural change starts, is people seeing, oh, this is something that my neighbors are dealing with, that my friends, my colleagues, my people in my church are dealing with. And that helps create not only awareness, but really empathy. And then people start to advocate around the cause. So that's really important. Well, thank you. Oh, do we have more questions? Yes. Jennifer says, I think honesty always shines through, good, bad, and the ugly. I sometimes preface it like a trigger warning. That's really great. But I think it's important to try and minimize our isolation as caregivers for others, to know what life is like with as little assumptions as possible. I don't think I could have said it better myself. Barbara says, how do you feel about blogs versus social media posts for sharing stories? I'll get more into that in the next webinar, but I think both. I think LinkedIn is like the combination of both. So LinkedIn, you could write a blog that's also in LinkedIn. I personally like blogs because I own the content, whereas you do not own the content on social media. So, I own my blog subscribers, my email subscribers. I can bring them anywhere with me. So I like a blog, but then you can use that content and share it out to social media. So that's just me. If you build your, if you put all your eggs in the Facebook basket, that can be overturned at really any minute. We don't really control that. So, but I will talk about a lot of that in the sort of how-to tactical stuff in the next webinar. So hope you can join me then. Okay. Anything else? I think you're muted. Are you muted?
I'm not. No, I
Okay.
don't think I have anything else. I'm just
Great.
really excited. We had such a great turnout today and looking forward to tomorrow.
I know. I look forward to seeing everything that you share. And I'm really looking forward to the next webinar. So thank you all. And like I said, reach out to me via email, reach out to Mary Ann, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.